Welcome to your sociology and psychology preparation session. Today, we are diving deep into digital well-being, specifically focusing on the effects of targeted advertising, screen time, and social media on Gen Z mental health. By the end of this lesson, you are going to walk away with complete clarity on this topic. So let's get started. When we look at Generation Z, we are studying the very first generation of true digital natives. Unlike previous generations who adapted to the internet, Gen Z has never known a world without smartphones. This constant, 24/7 connectivity fundamentally shapes their social development, altering how they form relationships, perceive themselves, and interact with society. To truly understand this phenomenon, we have to look at the intersection of sociology and psychology. We aren't just looking at individual brain chemistry, we are examining how massive societal structures, like tech companies and algorithmic platforms, influence collective behavior and mental health on a global scale. Let's break down exactly how this digital ecosystem operates. Now, let's break down the actual psychology behind why we can't seem to put our phones down. I am going to write out a few key concepts here. First, we have to talk about the dopamine loop. Every time you get a like, a comment, or a notification, your brain releases a tiny hit of dopamine, a neurotransmitter associated with pleasure and reward. But here is the catch: tech companies use variable reward schedules. Because you never know exactly when you will get that next notification or see an interesting post, your brain stays hooked, constantly refreshing the feed just like a slot machine. Next, let's look at cognitive overload. Our brains simply were not evolved to process the sheer volume of information presented to us every single day. Constant notifications, rapid context switching, and endless scrolling fragment your attention. This constant state of hyperarousal leads directly to chronic stress and mental fatigue, making it incredibly difficult for Gen Z to focus on deep, sustained tasks. How does social media specifically trigger anxiety? Let's map out the sociological cycle of social media consumption. It all starts right here with curated feeds. Platforms show us the absolute best, highly edited, and filtered moments of other people's lives. When you consume this content, it triggers a psychological process known as upward social comparison. You are constantly comparing your everyday, behind-the-scenes reality to someone else's highlight reel, which naturally makes you feel inadequate. This constant comparison breeds a powerful sociological phenomenon called FOMO, or the fear of missing out. You see your peers at events or achieving milestones, and you feel an intense pressure that you are falling behind. Ultimately, this chronic FOMO leads to heightened anxiety and isolation. Ironically, despite being more connected than any generation in history, Gen Z reports record levels of loneliness. And what do we do when we feel isolated? We reach for our phones to connect, feeding right back into the curated feeds, starting the toxic cycle all over again. Now, think about this for a moment. How does advertising play into this mental health crisis? Let's compare traditional media with the algorithmic media that Gen Z consumes today. Look at how targeting has evolved. Traditional media relied on broad demographics, like showing a toy commercial during a Saturday morning cartoon. But algorithmic media is hyper-personalized, tracking your every click, pause, and search to build a psychological profile of you. Next, consider the psychological hook. Old school ads just wanted brand recognition. Today's targeted ads engage in identity manipulation. If an algorithm detects you are feeling insecure about your skin, it will flood your feed with skincare ads, actively weaponizing your insecurities to sell products. Finally, let's look at the impact on Gen Z. Instead of passive consumption, algorithmic advertising creates massive echo chambers. It constantly reinforces a narrow worldview and exploits vulnerabilities, which sociologists argue is a major driver of body dysmorphia, financial anxiety, and the intense pressure to consume among young people today. Let's pause for a quick knowledge check to make sure you are grasping these core psychological concepts. Here is your question. Which psychological mechanism do social media platforms use to keep users endlessly scrolling? Option A is classical conditioning. Option B is variable reward schedules. Option C is cognitive dissonance. And option D is Maslow's hierarchy. Take a brief moment and pick your answer. The correct answer is B, variable reward schedules. Remember, just like a slot machine, the unpredictability of the reward, not knowing when you will get a like or see a funny video, is exactly what triggers the dopamine loop and keeps your brain hooked. Classical conditioning involves paired associations, and cognitive dissonance is about conflicting beliefs, neither of which explains the addictive scrolling behavior we see in digital environments. Understanding this specific mechanism is absolutely critical for your exam, as it bridges the gap between software design and human behavioral psychology. Let's finish up with a rapid-fire active recall session to lock in the key vocabulary for this topic. I will show you a definition, and you try to recall the term. First, the anxiety that an exciting event is happening elsewhere without you. What is this called? That is FOMO, or the fear of missing out. Next up, an environment where a person only encounters information or beliefs that coincide with their own. Do you remember this sociological term? That is an echo chamber, heavily driven by targeted algorithms. Finally, evaluating oneself by comparing to others who seem superior or better off. Think back to our cycle diagram. That is upward social comparison, a major driver of depression. And that wraps up everything you need to know about digital well-being and Gen Z mental health for your sociology and psychology journey. In our next class, we will be moving on to the sociology of modern family structures, so make sure you stay tuned. For more practice, visit Examiverse to learn more.